Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Content is finally back. I'm editing all the videos myself, so bear with me over the next couple of weeks and let me know any improvements or anything, any advice you have for me moving forward. Today we're going to be talking about the #1 tip for writing competitive lists. And remember guys, if you like my content, hit that subscribe button, notifications button in the bottom corner so you know each time I release one of these videos. Let's get right into it then, people. The #1 tip for list writing. So as a competitive full-time coach and content creator for Warhammer 40k, I get asked a lot of questions about how to make your list more optimal and all of this kind of stuff and how to get the best out of your list. But one question pops up more than the rest, and that is, what would you give as the #1 tip for a competitive list, like building a competitive list? What's the #1 tip? Here we go. So my #1 tip is build your list around 3 secondaries. I think that is very, very powerful in the meta right now. And that's why I specify competitive list writing. Because people often build their lists around powerful units, data sheets, and combos, which is a very, very strong way to build your list. But sometimes this can lack a solid win condition against more experienced players who are familiar with and confident at avoiding alpha strikes. Because if they don't let you hit as hard as you want to hit, then sometimes your list can crumble because it's built centrally around, like power, doing the most damage and being effective in that type of way. But maybe you haven't come into the game with 3 secondaries that you can solidly score. And then a more experienced player has, and they've got like a balanced list. And this is the thing, building around 3 secondaries has a lot of different benefits. One of which is that it allows you to play the game in a slightly more passive way sometimes. And it means your opponent then has to be the aggressor and sometimes come to you. Otherwise, they can see themselves losing from very on in the early of the game. So let's do one thing here. Let's take my current Dark Angels list. This is one that I won the Manchester GT with. It was a 256 player super major. And when we got to the top 4, it was 4 different Marine lists from 3 different chapters of Marines as well, which was quite interesting. And I managed to take home the win. And let's use that list as an example. So in that list, there were 2 Talon Masters and 20 Desolators. This meant that I could do Codex Warfare very, very well because the Desolators would shoot out of line of sight for the entire game and the Talon Masters as well. Now, the output from my Desolators, if they cannot see the thing they're shooting, the output from them is only enough to kill chaff units. And the same from Talon Masters. Talon Masters can kill slightly more heavier armored things because they don't take the penalties, their AP, or their hit rolls for shooting out line of sight, so they can kill slightly better targets than the Desolators. But later on in the game, where there's not many threats left that can hurt my Desolators, they can come out and start firing super crack shots as well. So I'm quite confident that throughout the game, I'll be able to kill 6 or 7 chaff units early on in the game, 3 or 4, then 3 or 4 meaningful units towards the end of the game, meaning that my Codex Warfare is going to max out because I've taken those units. But I took those units because they did Codex Warfare very well. Then I looked at another secondary in my army called Behind Enemy Lines. And the reason why I chose this one was that Dark Angels have a stratagem where after advancing with a Ravenwing unit, not moving, advancing with a Ravenwing unit, I can then spend 1 CP and move an additional 12 inches. Meaning that if I were to take Land Speeders in my army, which move 18 inches standard, plus 3 inches in the Devastator Doctrine for my Super Doctrine as Dark Angels, they move 21 inches. Then if I roll a 1 on my advance, that's the minimum advance, just a 1, they would be moving 22 inches. Then with spending my 1 CB stratagem, I could move them 34 inches minimum. If I roll a 1 on the advance, they move 34. And quite a lot of deployment zones, there's only 18 inches or 24 inches between you. So I can go 5 inches deep in my deployment zone to 5 inches deep in my opponent's deployment zone. And there's pretty much nothing that any army can do against that. So for that reason, I took 2 Land Speeders in my army as well, meaning that I could do it with 2 Land Speeders. Then in turn 3, I'd be able to do it with Terminators, who like deep struck in turn 2 and then managed to get in turn 3. And then turns 4 and 5, my Talon Masters were also advancing off. They'd be in a good position where they're in the middle of the board, where they could advance, shoot something in my opponent's deployment zone, get Codex Warfare, and also get behind enemy lines. So the synergy is there for those 2 secondaries as well. Then my third one, I would do Oaths of Moment or Raise the Banners. And for that reason, I had 20 Deathwing Terminators. Because if I'm going to hold the middle of the board, I need some reliable, durable units that are going to be able to stand there and take big punches. So I looked at the Codex and I went, I can do Codex Warfare and behind enemy lines extremely well. Then I can also do Oaths of Moment / Banners for 10 to 15 points, meaning I am reliably scoring 40 to 45 on my secondaries in any game. And that immediately would put my opponent on the back foot and put me one step ahead of them because I came in the game with 3 that I can score completely regardless of what my opponent gives away. And that's the strong thing about it, is that I can do these irrelevant of what my opponent gives away. And that's a really, really strong way of writing your list. So there you have it, guys. That's my #1 tip for competitive list writing. If you like these videos, guys, remember to like and share for more content.